caring. We've got it all together on the scene at 6 and 10.
Watergate, of course, since June of last year, never went away for the Nixon administration, and it was the methodical digging of newsmen which cracked it open. In his speech last night, and in something of a change of sentiment or a change of tone, the president acknowledged the contribution of a vigorous free press. Kind words from the administration, perhaps unusual words, since Mr. Nixon has never been at peace with the press in general. But Watergate was a dramatic argument for a free press, and one question is whether from here on this administration will try to have a happier relationship with the media. With Frank McGee and me now are the associate editor of the Washington Evening Star, Crosby Noyes, Vice President Agnew's one-time press aide, Victor Gold, and James Kilpatrick, a syndicated Washington columnist. Gentlemen, first let's ask what your key one or two impressions are of the president's speech. Mr. Kilpatrick?
I thought it was a somber speech, grave speech, not as well delivered as ordinarily the president delivers his speeches, a little bit uptight. A little too much corn for my own tastes in there, but it may have been effective out in the country. I objected to some of the touches in the speech that he first learned of this while he was resting from his labors from the trip to Russia, and that he had compiled this list in his agony on Christmas Eve of the goals that he wanted achieved. I want to come back to this because I think it may be one of the explanations for Watergate, these excesses of zeal that the president himself falls into in his rhetoric.
Vic Gold?
I thought it was a very good speech. I didn't rate it really as a creative and artistic speech, but I thought that it was very effective. I thought there were 3 points the president made very well. First, that I think it's very important that we keep in mind that the people involved here have not been judicially or legally tried for anything. They're innocent until proved guilty. Secondly, I think the president accepted full responsibility, which he should have, and which was correct. And third, I think the appointment of Secretary Richardson was vitally important because he is a man of unimpeachable integrity, and I believe that he's the type of man who will cut through to the marrow on this. And so I think that from a substantive standpoint, the president's speech was very effective.
Crosby Noyes?
I think it was a pretty awful speech myself. I think it was one of the worst that he's made since Checkers, and the point really that got by me was the acceptance of full responsibility and then the appeal for public support for the presidency, despite the fact that he is responsible ultimately for everything that happened in the Watergate affair.
Did he not say everything he should have said? Should he have said different things, more things, gone further?
No, I think he said rather too much rather than too little. I think he should have announced the firings of these people and said the essentials of what he had to say without going on quite as long as he did.
Do you agree with that, Jack?
Yes and no, Bill. I want to come back to this point that's sticking in my head this morning about the excesses, not just in the speech, but the excesses that led to it. The question in the end is, why didn't the president know? Let us assume for the moment that what he said happened, that he was so preoccupied with the affairs of state that he delegated all the responsibility for the campaign to Morris Stans and to John Mitchell and to the others. Then they never told him. No one ever told him about these things. Well, why didn't they ever tell him? One answer is that they didn't know. They were ignorant. But that, to me at least, strains credulity. The other answer is they didn't tell him because of what? Because they thought these things would be acceptable to him? They didn't want him to know? This, to me, is a question mark that still hangs over it today.
Let me ask a larger question. Are you satisfied that the president indeed did not have prior knowledge, Jim?
Yes, I am satisfied with that, Frank. I'm willing to accept his word on that in his preoccupations last year, as he said, this was a great chess game going on. He was caught up in this thing all over the world. I can believe, yes, under those circumstances, he would have delegated this, especially in the early months of last year, when McGovern was so on the polls and there was nothing much going on.
Excuse me, Vic.
You don't agree with that?
I would like to go along with you to this extent. I believe that, I would hope that out of this experience will come an end to this business, which I believe in my lifetime started with Franklin Roosevelt in 1944, that the president in an election year is too busy being president to engage in a political campaign. And I believe that this was the particular argument that the president used last night. And I would have to go along that I believe that the political process itself is too important to be left and delegated to subordinates. And I believe the business of I'm too busy being president to run for president is probably passé now.
Let me ask you specifically, are you convinced the president had no prior knowledge?
I am convinced. I would have to believe that that our president had no prior knowledge when he says he had no prior knowledge, yes, sir.
I'd like to hear also from you, Mr. Noyes.
Well, I think one of the big things that the president has going for him in this situation is the sort of ardent wish of most Americans to believe that he had no prior knowledge. And I think that he's a long way from being out of the woods on it yet, because it will depend on what people say when they get before grand juries and are testifying under oath as to what their knowledge was and who said what to who. What Magruder or Dean or people like that will say when they get before a grand jury, I think we have to wait and see.
And Frank, can I make another point? Prior knowledge of what?
Oh,
prior knowledge of the bugging.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to believe the president implicitly on it that he had no prior knowledge that this actual electronic device was being put in the Democratic headquarters. I'm going to believe him on that. But prior knowledge of a lot of other things.
Well, what about the attempt to cover it up?
Well, I have to accept the implications of his speech on that as well, that he had no knowledge of these funds. But the only one who remains of all those whose names have been mentioned now is his own personal attorney, Mr. Kalmbach. He, at least so far as we know, has not been dismissed. It's been charged that Mr. Kalmbach was in charge of this great fund out there in California from which the payoff money was coming. We haven't heard anything about that.
What about Morris Stans?
Haven't heard much about him.
What do you think his future is?
He was doing business with the bagmen. I mean, after all, when you talk about people didn't know. What did Stans think was in that safe? Old Confederate bonds or monopoly money, or what did you think was in there?
Well, I think we have to go a little frankly, a little slowly on the business of Mr. Stans or anyone else. You know, there comes a time when the speculation itself, as we're doing now, and we're entitled to speculate, but I think that there is a narrow line here. These are things that are going to come out in the weeks and months ahead through the judicial process, through the grand jury.
Well, I raised them because they haven't come out through the judicial process.
Yes, I understand that, and I understand that.
They came out through the press initially.
Yes, that's correct.
So
that's correct.
I think it's legitimate.
What about relations between the media and the government from now on? Do you think they might be any different, Crosby?
I doubt that they're going to change very much. I think that that's a matter of the personality of the president more than the organization around him. I don't think...
Didn't the president's bow to the press last night?
Well, it was, a brief nod, but I don't think it's going to change anything substantial.
I disagree. I disagree, not because... Pardon me, Jack. Not because of... I disagree with what Mr. Noyes says in terms of the personal inclination, but because I believe we're in a new ball game here with the media. The administration is. I believe that the media issue, as an issue for this administration, is dead tactically. I think the media problem, if I may say so, is still with us. This has never been a partisan Republican issue. We've had Democratic committees involved in this type of thing.
Why do you call it a new ball game?
Because I believe that the administration, so to speak, was hoisted by its own petard with regard to the Washington Post. I would just have to say that it would be very difficult for any member of the administration to criticize the Post or in the future.
Jack, what do you think about relations between the media and the government?
I don't think they're going to be much better, Bill, and that's a good thing. I like an adversary relationship. But I think we will remember for a long time that these excellent jobs by the Washington Post were described as shabby journalism in the course of all this. Well, it wasn't shabby journalism. It was superlative journalism. The president's bow, I thought, as Crosby said, was a kind of a short nod last night. It was one part of one sentence. That's not what you would call really throwing encomiums or bouquets where they were richly deserved.
You have about 30 seconds. If you could talk to anyone you please at this juncture and get from him what you wanted to know, who'd you rather talk to?
John Mitchell.
John Mitchell. Jim?
How about John Mitchell?
Vic?
I haven't. That's a hard question to answer on a spur of the moment. I don't know who I'd rather talk to. I'd rather listen.
Okay. Cool.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Crosby Noyes, Vic Gold, Jack Kilpatrick, Frank McGee. Now time for a station break.
Vince Edwards and Jill St. John had an all-star cast in a rip-roaring Western musical Thursday night.
Every baby needs basically the same things: food, clothing, a place to sleep, friend or two, and especially a feeling of security. That's why you need a savings account for your favorite baby. At First Federal of Nashville, passbook accounts earn interest from day deposited to day withdrawn, compounded daily. Your account will grow as your little friend grows, bigger and bigger.
First Federal of Nashville, building happiness day by day. 4 offices to serve you.
Good morning. A look at the Metro school bus report today shows bus 136 with a substitute driver on time. Bus 298 replaced by 242. It's on time. 129 has been replaced by 215 on time. Bus L2 replaced this morning by bus 217. It's running on time. Bus 402 replaced by bus 186, running on time. And bus 246 has been replaced by bus 172 to West Meade. It is on time. Well, Tennessee's top Republicans generally praised President Nixon's Watergate speech last night. Senator Howard Baker said the president's action will not alter plans for a full Senate investigation of the scandal. Baker is the ranking Republican on the Senate committee investigating the incident. Tennessee's other senator, William Brock, said President Nixon has done what he had to do to restore confidence in government. Meanwhile, counsel to the Senate committee investigating Watergate, Nashville attorney Fred Thompson, confirmed Senator Baker's thoughts when he said the action of the presidential advisors yesterday will have no effect on the committee investigation. In other news, the Tennessee House of Representatives burned the midnight oil last night, and early today, lawmakers worked for more than 7 hours on the massive general appropriations bill. The session ended just before 1 a.m. today. The lower chamber considered 88 amendments. State Finance and Administration Commissioner Ted Welch says the amendments adopted would add $300 million to Governor Dunn's nearly $2 billion budget. Welch said most of the increase amounted to what he called pork barrel. The state Senate has passed and sent to the governor legislation which would provide classroom equipment and teachers for a total comprehensive vocational program in every high school in the state. Passage of the bill represents a sweeping change in present educational attitudes in Tennessee. One of the bill's sponsors, Senator Jim White of Memphis, said surveys show that in the past, education has been catering to only about 20% of the students. White said bonds totaling $132 million will have to be authorized to finance implementation of the program. A congressional subcommittee opens hearings today on rate increases by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Congressman Joe Evans says he hopes the public hearings will force the agency to roll back some of its increases. Evans, who's a Tennessee Democrat, is chairman of the House Subcommittee on Appropriations for Public Works. The city of Morristown and Hamlin County have gone to Chancery Court at Nashville in an attempt to prevent construction of a regional prison in their area. A suit said such a prison would endanger students at Walter State Community College at Morristown. The Dunn administration has proposed building the prison in Hamlin County. And the owners of Donaldson Plaza have been ordered to improve their waste treatment facilities. The order was handed down by the state public health department. The agency said the waste treatment facilities are polluting the Stones River. The owners of the plaza have appealed the order. They added that there is a lack of public sewer facilities in the Donaldson area of Nashville. Check of our weather now. We'll take a look at our national map, and as you can see, things are going to be wet again. The warm, moist air from an offshore high-pressure system combining with the cold air in back of that stationary front are producing heavy showers and thunder shower activity all the way up into Illinois and Wisconsin, where there are flash flood warnings. Tornadoes reported overnight in Oklahoma and some rather severe weather in that area. The system is moving our way, should be bringing showers and thunder showers with it. We'll look at the long-range radar, scanning 125 miles, and you can see a wide band of shower and thunder shower activity, mostly up in Kentucky at this hour. There is a chance that in our area we may experience some shower activity this afternoon, but certainly by tonight, generally cloudy and mild today through tomorrow is the forecast. Showers and thunder showers likely tonight, increasing tomorrow. High today, upper 70s, low tonight, mid 60s, high tomorrow, low 70s. Chances of rain 70% tonight and 80% tomorrow. Right now in Nashville, the winds are from the west at 15 miles per hour. Humidity is 70%, and with cloudy skies in Nashville at 63 degrees. And that's the scene today. We'll have another report at 8:25. Good morning.
Surrounded by secret treasures, a little girl's world comes alive on Evans Black Carpeting by Armstrong. Rich in jewel tone colors, this carpeting has lasting brilliance and durability. Blend good looks and practicality with carpeting from Osborne Hesse Carpet Center. Choose from over 1,000 rolls of fine carpeting in dramatic shades and weaves, with prices starting at only $3.95. For carpeting to live on, not just look at, see Osborne Hesse Carpet Center, 402 Murfreesboro Road.
We're originating the Today program in Washington this morning in the aftermath of President Nixon's speech on Watergate and the resignation of 4 of the president's top White House aides. Yesterday, White House aides John Ehrlichman and H.R. Haldeman resigned under pressure, according to the Washington Post. Chief White House counsel John Dean III also quit. The president said he resigned. Other reports said that Dean was fired. Attorney General Richard Kleindienst, who earlier disqualified himself from prosecuting the Watergate case, yesterday resigned from the cabinet. Then the president went on television, said he had been misled by his subordinates, but would accept the responsibility for what happened. He named Elliot Richardson his new attorney general and said Richardson could choose a special prosecutor if he feels it necessary. Now, for the rest of this morning's news, here in New York is Frank Blair.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The country's Democratic governors meeting in Huron, Ohio, have called on President Nixon to turn the Watergate investigation over to an independent prosecutor. We have a report from John Harrington.
The Democratic governors were drawing up domestic policy statements when they got news of the resignations. They expressed surprise, said Watergate is too damaging to the country to be a partisan political issue, and said a special prosecutor outside the Justice Department should be appointed.
We are convinced, I believe I can say for all of those present, that the Justice Department has been so compromised, including the FBI, that unless we get a special prosecutor into the field, we don't believe it's going to be possible to restore the faith of the American people and their system of government.
A special prosecutor is needed to clear up any question in the public's mind of what transpired, what happened, who was involved, and how.
Well, the resignations are only one small step, to paraphrase, and we of course, are going to continue to be, as the public is going to be, and as I would hope the president will be. That's unrelenting in his demand and his search for the truth and for some facts out of this.
The governors did pass domestic resolutions on several issues, but they were lost in the impact of Watergate. John Harrington, NBC News, Huron, Ohio.
3 of the nation's top Democratic legislators will be questioned about the Democratic reaction to Watergate here on the Today program later in this half hour. Some people saw irony in the fact that the Watergate resignations came on the eve of America's observance of Law Day. Here's Today Washington editor Bill Monroe.
Last night, the president's Watergate speech. This morning, Law Day 1973. You can look at that combination in 2 ways. You can take a negative, pessimistic view. Here we have Law Day following months of revelations about high officials breaking the law and playing dirty tricks that subvert the idea of fair play in politics. Suitcases stuffed with cash, 1, 2, 3 secret funds, evidence destroyed, burglary inside this Watergate building, a big budget and paid agents for bugging and spying, explanations changing from month to month, endless denials eventually declared in language worthy of a computer inoperative. All of that and more leading up to Law Day. But there's a positive, optimistic view that is also tenable. President Nixon touched on it last night when he said it was the system that brought the facts to light. A few months ago, it looked as if somebody high up had just about succeeded in covering up Watergate. 7 men had been convicted, but nobody knew who told them to do it. But some journalists refused to let it go, led by the publisher and the editor of the Washington Post and their reporters, Bernstein and Woodward. The judge who tried the Watergate 7 got angry because the prosecution didn't seem to be anxious to find out who gave the orders, who paid out the money. He applied the pressure of the law until one of the 7 decided to tell his story. The 2-party system helped out, with the Democrats filing suit to try to get at the facts. A citizens group, Common Cause, went to court to pry loose information on secret campaign contributions. The Senate asked Sam Ervin to investigate. The whole thing began to smell to the American people. and various Republican leaders prodded the president to root it out, tell what happened, and fire whoever had to be fired. Yesterday, the president did. And as he acknowledged, until now, the White House failed, but the system eventually worked. It's called checks and balances. So this turns out to be, after all, Law Day. Bill Monroe, NBC News, at the Watergate.
A state of emergency has been declared in Buenos Aires and 5 provinces of Argentina as a result of the assassination yesterday of a retired admiral, Hermes Quillada, by left-wing guerrillas. 25 officials of South Yemen, including the country's foreign minister, have been killed in the crash of an airliner northeast of Aden. The government has not announced the cause of the crash. 35.5 after the hour, the weather forecast after these messages.
Look, when it comes to central air conditioners, I've seen them all, even the round ones. Out here, the name that really draws them in is Lennox. The Lennox people have been around 80 years. They make real fine central air conditioners you just add to your forced air furnace. Buy one now during Lennox nifty weather days.
I'd walk a mile for a Lennox.
Hey, you're up early. Thought your arthritis was acting up.
Yes, but my knee doesn't feel as stiff this morning. Took 2 Bayer timed release aspirin to relieve the pain before I turned in.
Timed release?
It's made to work overtime. Each tablet has twice as much Bayer aspirin, micro-encapsulated, so you only take it once in 8 hours.
Relieves minor arthritic pain, huh?
Sure helps me wake without that morning stiffness.
Get Bayer timed release aspirin. It's made to work overtime.
Scattered severe thunderstorms are expected today and tonight across a large area from North Texas, across Oklahoma to southeastern Kansas, Iowa, and Wisconsin, into all of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana. This looks like a very active storm pattern, so keep up on local advisories, especially in our sky-worn bulletin areas. 16 tornadoes have occurred since this time yesterday morning. We're having still another major spring storm for the hard-hit central states for this first day of May. The thunderstorms in the Midwest and the Mississippi Valley may drop heavy local rains of 1 to 3 inches. Heavy snows will continue today in southeast Wyoming and across northeast Colorado to the central Rockies. The far west will be fair, the southeastern states fair and very warm. The northeast and New England will be cool and cloudy. Brings us to 37.5 after the hour. And we'll be right back after these messages.
I can cook a main dish for the Garagiola family like a roast or a casserole. Never time it, never stir it. You see, the Garagiola is cooked with a crock pot, a slow electric stoneware cooker. Low heat encircles real stoneware, and food cooks all day while the cook's away for about 3 cents. And if old Joe can do it, you can do it. Be sure to get a crock pot, not an imitation. The crock pot rivals original slow stoneware cooker. It's like having your own cook. Crock pot by Rival.
You want your porcelain and stainless steel to stay as new looking as it was when it was first new? So you should be using this Bon Ami Deluxe Polishing Cleanser. It's so gentle and effective. It helps restore fine surfaces marred by more abrasive cleansers. You see, only Bon Ami contains feldspar, and that's a soothing and polishing agent that will not scratch. Try Bon Ami Deluxe Polishing Cleanser. It hasn't scratched yet.
We'll be talking in just a moment with 3 Democratic senators, Alan Cranston, Henry Jackson, and Thomas Eagleton. As a matter of fact, we're talking with them already, and we'll be back in just a few moments, so don't go far.
The encore presentation of an award-winning special tomorrow at 10, 9 Central Time.
Here's a great ice cream, a Meadow Gold ice cream they call Supreme. Try Supreme. Old-fashioned flavor and old-fashioned goodness you like. Supreme great ice cream, that big round half-gallon, you'll love it. One dish and they'll all want more of it. It's rich and it's creamy, it's smooth and it's dreamy. Yes, that's what Meadow Gold is.
Last June, 10 months ago, President Nixon said the White House was not involved in Watergate, whatever. And for months, he continued to say the same thing. But last night, the president went on television to acknowledge that there was indeed White House involvement in Watergate. He named no names, but he said he wanted the whole incident pursued fairly and fearlessly. Well, many questions remain, and we will discuss them now with 3 Democratic senators. We've talked with a group of Republican senators in our other hour. With us at this point this morning are Senator Alan Cranston of California, Senator Henry Jackson of Washington, Senator Thomas Eagleton, whom you see on your screen now, and now we'll see Senator Jackson. Got the chairs out of order. Sorry, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. I'd like to pursue in general the same line of questioning with you that I did with the Republican senators a while ago, but there's one aspect of this case that you would know more about than they possibly could. You, Senator Jackson, during your primary campaigns last year, is there any reason, do you have any reason to believe that the sort of activity associated with Watergate was involved in your campaign?
Well, we've not been able to find out just what went on, but in the Florida primary, there were several things, but one thing in particular that stood out was a letter that was circulated under Senator Muskie's letterhead wrongfully, without any authority from him, and he had absolutely nothing to do with it, libeling Senator Humphrey and myself in the Florida primary campaign. I turned this over to the Assistant United States Attorney in Tampa a day or two before the election. And they did nothing about it at all until Segretti appeared on the scene. He was the man allegedly in charge of the Department of Dirty Tricks and had been active, apparently, in Florida. Then when the matter was taken up with the United States Attorney again, he said that he thought I wanted to have the state authorities look into it. Well, I happen to have been a prosecutor myself. I know a little bit about the law. I turned it over to the United States Attorney because they're a violation of several federal laws. They did nothing about it. And their report, after allegedly the FBI at their request, United States Attorney's request went into it, nothing happened. I've turned it over to Senator Ervin. It's quite clear that it was a part of a plan or a scheme against the Democratic candidates in Florida.
Senator Eagleton, did you have any experience like that, or anything
similar? I can't point to any incident that would relate to any of the Department of Dirty Tricks, sabotage, bugging, or anything insofar as my brief vice presidential run last summer.
Mm-hmm. Senator Cranston, do you have any comment to make on this general subject?
Yes, I have. One question that people keep asking is, what possible gains were there that could match the immense risks of all this? And in the latter stages of the campaign, I think that's a very good question to ask. But I think there's some reason to believe that a sabotage operation had a lot to do with knocking Ed Muskie out of the box fairly early in the political year. And if that is established, as I think it may well be by the Ervin Committee, because some material has been turned over to them or will be on this subject, it may become rather evident that things that happened to Ed Muskie, who was leading Richard Nixon in the polls then, that drove him down and out, had a lot to do with then creating a situation where the president won against somebody else who never ran that strongly.
Could you be a little more specific, Senator Cranston, as to what you mean?
Well, the letter that involved his wife that caused quite a commotion, and suggestions that Ed had used some word like Cajun in respect to a minority group, which caused him a great deal of trouble, that may have been planted. There's some evidence to that. I don't know this. It's not been established, but I think the Ervin Committee will be looking into that, and we may have a new revelation on that score later on.
In the broader context now, I'd like to ask you the same question I put to the Republican senators. If you, and I'll turn to you for Senator Eagleton, if you feel the president went as far as he could or should in his speech last night.
I think he should have gone to the ultimate in naming, or at least indicating that he would name a special prosecutor. I think this is vital. I know he's appointed a new attorney general, and he's a good and decent man, Elliot Richardson. And he alluded to the fact in his speech last night that Richardson would have authority if he saw fit at a later date to appoint a special prosecutor. But in my judgment, the only way that public confidence will be restored insofar as the impartiality of this investigation is concerned is that if a special prosecutor of prestigious credentials is appointed, and by analogy I point, of course, to the Teapot Dome era, President Coolidge's appointment of Owen Roberts as the special prosecutor, Owen Roberts later becoming United States Supreme Court Justice Roberts. And I wish the president in this speech had made such an announcement, because I think it would have been very helpful in this situation.
It's my understanding that Senator Percy and Senator Buckley will introduce a resolution in the Senate today calling for substantially that approach. Would you support that, Senator?
Yes, well, I don't know whether I want to insist on Senate confirmation, because this is an ad hoc special situation. It seems to me that the President should have directed Elliot Richardson to appoint a special prosecutor, a man who would have the confidence of the American people. There's another aspect to this problem, and that is at every move a political figure is heading the effort. And this is what has to be avoided. Take the FBI. This is the heart of the whole process by which the investigations would be conducted for the Attorney General or a special prosecutor. Seems to me that the President, with the lesson of Gray behind him, should have appointed the top professional out of the FBI as an acting director. I have a bill in to require that the appointee must have at least 10 years professional experience in the FBI, and appoint him for 15 years, and cannot be removed except for cause. Now, you see, I think the public feels that the FBI, unthinkable, is being politicized. Ruckelshaus is a fine man, but he can't restore the confidence, the same point that Senator Eagleton made regarding Elliot Richardson. Those two key figures, the special prosecutor, the acting head of the FBI, should be far removed from anything political. I'd sum it all up by saying that at this point in time, the best politics is no politics. That applies on the Democratic side, that applies on the Republican side. The American people feel that the institution of the presidency, the White House, has been badly tarnished in this go-round. And I just feel that those steps are really, after you look at the whole effort here, are not being taken.
I have been asking a question yesterday and this morning, and I think in justice to myself, I think I should explain that I ask it because I am aware, as you are, that many people across the country are asking it. So I'm going to ask it again, and I'll turn to you, Senator Cranston. Are you satisfied that President Nixon had no prior knowledge of the general campaign espionage activities or the later attempts to cover them up?
I don't think we know enough to make any judgment about that at the present time. Certainly the President shed no light on any of the facts in all of this last night. I hesitate to leap to any conclusions about what he knew or did not know. I think the investigation, one or the other of the investigations, court actions, whatever happens under a special prosecutor or the new Attorney General or the Irvin Committee, will get all the facts out. And the facts will speak of Richard Nixon. They will speak of the people around Richard Nixon. And the people will then form their own judgment of all this.
Either you gentlemen?
No, I just give him the presumption that he didn't know. But it seems to me there's a real lesson from all of this. And that is that the President could have avoided much of it if he had held press conferences, with the press being able to ask him questions which he would have been required to answer. That's the real lesson. I think the press deserves great credit for unearthing all of this.
But are you suggesting, Senator, it might have placed some questions in his mind that he then would have gone and checked on earlier?
Yes, yes. I think the interrogatory process in a press conference puts the burden on the President to be up on all these things. The President would then have been on top of this. But all during this period, well, I don't know, 2 or 3 press conferences since last June. It's incredible. And had there been press conferences, then I think much of this could have been avoided, and the institution of the presidency would be in much better shape than it is today. That ought to be a lesson for all of us and for the whole process under which all of this goes on.
I'd like to add that the press did so much in this that this might well be called Press Day as well as Law Day, because the press had a lot to do with all of this coming out.
In talking with your colleagues earlier, I asked them if they felt that it would be difficult for their party to wage a law and order campaign in 1974 or 1976, and in general, a question of the effect this would have on those campaigns. What would be your views on that, Senator Eagleton?
Well, at least for the foreseeable future, it would put a bit of a throttle on any Republican spokesman to try to articulate too vocally the concept of, quote, law and order. I mean, it would seem a bit duplicitous or two-faced. But How long this would endure remains to be seen. I don't think it permanently obliterates that as a potential issue on the American scene by a long shot.
Senator Cranston?
I think it makes it a little bit tough to carry on a law and order campaign in the light of all this. One of the aspects that ties into something that Senator Jackson was saying a moment ago in relationship to the FBI, the Attorney General's office should be above and removed from politics. It used to be that the Postmaster General was the political figure, like in Jim Farley's day. Then, for some reason, it moved over to the Department of Justice. And we have now seen Mr. Mitchell, who was forced to resign, who was a campaign chairman for the president. We see Mr. Kleindienst, who is a very active politician as Attorney General, and he had to resign. I voted against him in part because he was a political figure. I think it's very important to have the whole element of enforcement of law totally removed from politics. And as the head of the FBI should be a professional in law enforcement, the Attorney General should not necessarily be a professional policeman, but he should be somebody totally removed from politics, above it, beyond it, with no responsibility to politicians to hide the truth, as we have had reason to believe perhaps high occupants of that office have hidden the truth.
You know, with all the criticism of J. Edgar Hoover, he looks better every day. I was a strong supporter of him because as prosecutor, my home county, I had the famous Mattson case, and I have great respect for their professionalism. You can't get everything that you want out of any group. There are problems that arise out of any organization. But it's so important that an organization with a tremendous power, the FBI, be far removed from politics, and it gets down to people.
We've less than a...
Could I raise one point that I think was left unanswered in the President's speech last night, the question of giving of immunity. Senator Jackson and I are both ex-prosecutors. We don't want to be overly legalistic, but when you get to the question of a special prosecutor, you also get to the point of, in order to have people come forward and give evidence, who is to be granted immunity? The President, in a statement 2 weeks ago, was very categorical in saying that no immunity would be given.
Possibly shutting off testimony.
And this would, in effect, shut off important and vital testimony. He said nothing on that issue last night. I think that, along with the special prosecutor matter, is a very important unresolved question, because in order to make a case in court, you have to have live testimony from present witnesses.
Senator Cranston, Senator Eagle, Senator Jackson, thank you for being with us this morning. And we'll be back after this message.
It's 52 minutes after the hour. Did you ever find a flat latex paint good enough for every room of the house? Well, you try this. It's easy living paint. It's Sears Best.
When Leland Stanford drove the Golden Spike, he began a golden trail that led to the governor's mansion in Sacramento. Now a home for foster children, this house is still elegant, thanks to Sears' new Easy Living Paint. A luxurious flat finish latex that cleans like enamel. Use Easy Living Paint on walls and woodwork, in any room. Ordinary household dirt does not penetrate its incredibly tough surface. Easy Living Paint, Sears Best, designed for great American homes like yours.
Sears Lady Kenmore dishwasher gives you freedom from scraping, freedom from pre-rinsing, because it has 2 hot water jets that scour dishes and a stainless steel pulverizer for soft food waste. We call Sears Lady Kenmore the Freedom Maker, because it gives you freedom to do more important things.
We've made an informal and an unscientific sampling of the reaction of ordinary Americans to President Nixon's speech and the government shakeup resulting from the Watergate. And here is what people said in a number of key cities.
Well, I got an idea the president knew all about it myself.
Oh, goodness, I think it's bad. I really do.
I think that there's been too much play of it, and I think it's probably both sides do the same thing all the time.
And I think it's the type thing that has lost confidence for the American people in their government.
Well, I think it's a shame that it had to happen.
Well, it shakes my trust of the democratic system.
I worked for the New York Committee to re-elect the president. I have confidence in the president. I think perhaps that he was hoodwinked.
The president himself has downgraded the presidency to a degree that's really frightening.
Personally, I think that it's high time that Congress has a bigger voice in what's going on.
Does this shake your confidence in the administration?
Not at all.
What I got from his speech was that he was more or less cutting his own throat
by saying things like he was going to go all the way and find out who was responsible for the Watergate affair, you know. And I mean, if he goes all the way, I mean, he's going to have to look to himself.
I don't believe he knew what was going on when it was going on. He may have thought he knew some of the activities, that is in the pre-planning stages, but he was in the dark all along the lines.
Do you think then that he should be held responsible for what happened?
Yes.
Well, it's taken them a long time to find out what everybody else suspected, it seems to me.
I was very glad to hear this speech tonight because it leaves the people, gives them more knowledge of what's going on. And I feel deeply that now, from now on, we're going to either know and feel assured or have faith in our president.
Well, I looked at it that it was purely political. But I think that it's a shame that the government is in such corruption that the people don't really know what's happening. And I can't see anything else but that it is purely political speech. It is not from his heart.
I have to believe that he didn't know about it. You know, just based on what I've heard, there's absolutely no evidence that indicates that he does know anything about it.
I think he knew about it. I think he's too smart a politician not to have known about it. I don't think he came across as being sincere, and I don't think the country's going to buy it.
Well, for one thing, it was schmaltzy, it was cliche-ridden, but it was basically sincere. The man finally got out in the open, what I think is the truth.
I think a lot of his speech was propaganda and political flair, but I really don't think he had anything to do with it.
Now, I missed the first few words of his speech, but as I said, if Nixon could speak, he'd be the greatest president we ever had, but he can't give a TV speech worth listening to.
It seems to me that if Mr. Nixon didn't know about it, he's foolish. If he did know about it, he's culpable, and there should be some effort made to make him assume responsibility for what's happened.
There are two alternatives. Either Nixon knew about it, and if he did, of course, he should be impeached. And if he didn't, that means that he's not running the administration. Either way is unacceptable to me.
And at 4 minutes before the hour, we'll be back after this message.
Metal dents. And you know what happens to glass. But this material is Lexan. And Lexan takes the same punishment without breaking, without denting, shattering, chipping, or breaking any hearts. So look for this tag. It tells you the product is made of Lexan, the material that protects our astronauts. Lexan. It's really tough.
Here's a really important saving for anybody's piggy bank. Until May 31st, you can save up to $40 on a beautiful spring air back supporter mattress set. This is the back supporter mattress. It's famous for its surface comfort with deep down sleep support. So you see it now at Spring Air dealers and save as much as $40 depending on mattress size. The back supporter mattress, only made by Spring Air.
Thank you, and don't go far.
Our special guest on Dinah's Place today is Barbara Woodhouse, and she has done incredible things with Shirley Booth's dog Echo and my dog Grunt. I want you to see this.
Mothers of the world, stop rocking and get moving with Celebrity Mothers Week on NBC. Famous mothers from all walks of life demonstrate their knowledge and skill on the NBC daytime shows. Remember, next week, Mom's the word.
Introducing the 3-spoon test.
We're conducting a test, and can you tell me what's in these 3 spoons?
Yeah, coffee.
Right.
Which one would you pick as the richest looking coffee?
Probably that dark brown.
Why?
I suppose because its color is more like a nice black cup of coffee.
All right. You picked Folgers Crystals. Let's make a cup.
Now you picked this one because you thought it looked richer.
Now taste it and tell me if it's a really rich cup of coffee.
Yes, it is, and it tastes real good. Can I have the whole cup? It's very good.
And does it taste as rich as it looks?
It certainly does. Tastes as rich as it looks.
Tell me again, what is your name?
Joanne DeTore.
Joanne DeTore, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Nice to meet you.
Folgers Crystals. It tastes as rich as it looks.
This is Channel 4, WSM-TV Nashville, the telecasting service of the National Life and Accident Insurance Company. Another hour of the Today Show is next. It's 8 o'clock.
The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
This is Watergate, a cluster of posh apartments and office buildings on the bank of the Potomac River in Washington. Watergate once housed the offices of the Democratic National Committee. For 10 months, since last June, it's been a political time bomb, ticking, waiting to explode. And finally it did. And it tore a gaping hole in President Nixon's White House staff. Good morning. This is today, Tuesday, May 1st. All of our program today is devoted to the dramatic developments surrounding the Watergate case, and so we are originating from Washington. In the past 24 hours, the major casualties have been H.R. Haldeman, the White House Chief of Staff, who resigned yesterday after meeting with the President Sunday at Camp David, and John Ehrlichman, Mr. Nixon's chief advisor on domestic affairs, who handed in his resignation along with Haldeman. In the beginning, 7 men were indicted for the break-in at Democratic National Headquarters, but as the months passed, various members of the Nixon administration, together with officials of his re-election campaign and some of the president's most trusted aides and closest friends, were implicated in the broadening investigation, either directly involved in the affair or attempting to cover it up. Yesterday, after a weekend in seclusion at Camp David, the president acted, and the axe fell. Haldeman and Ehrlichman resigned. The president fired John W. Dean III, the man who conducted the original White House investigation into Watergate. Dean had recently been quoted as saying he wasn't going to be a scapegoat. Also out was Attorney General Richard Kleindienst, who had said earlier he was disqualifying himself from the Watergate case because some of his close personal associates were involved. He, too, resigned. Last night, the president went on national television to say he was appalled and shocked to learn that some members of his re-election organization were apparently guilty. Until March of this year, he said, he believed that the charges were false on the basis of reports he was getting. Then, in his speech, the president took note of the resignations of 2 of his closest political associates.
Today, in one of the most difficult decisions of my presidency, I accepted the resignations of 2 of my closest associates in the White House, Bob Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, 2 of the finest public servants it has been my privilege to know. I want to stress that in accepting these resignations, I mean to leave no implication, whatever, of personal wrongdoing on their part. And I leave no implication tonight of implication on the part of others who have been charged in this matter. But in matters as sensitive as guarding the integrity of our democratic process, it is essential not only that rigorous legal and ethical standards be observed, but also that the public, you, have total confidence that they are both being observed and enforced by those in authority, and particularly by the President of the United States.
Despite his ouster, Ehrlichman appeared unruffled. He said he expects to be around the White House for several weeks, handing over domestic affairs, phasing himself out. He still claims the stories linking him to Watergate are not correct.
In my instance, it's more a case of simply becoming a symbol. It's a situation where a great many erroneous stories have been printed and played very prominently on television. And I find myself spending almost full time bringing out the facts. I've been working 14, 16-hour days for the president over a period of the last 4.5 years. And I can't do that. I just can't do the job if I'm going to be spending all my time knocking down erroneous stories. It isn't fair to the president. It isn't fair to my colleagues on the staff who have to fill in for me. And so just in conscience, if I'm going to become a symbol in this thing, I can't stay on and ask the president to keep me in place while I spend my time in that kind of activity.
In his 24-minute talk last night, Mr. Nixon said he accepted the blame for any improper actions on the part of his White House staffers or campaign people. In promising to get at all the facts, he named Elliot Richardson, only a recent appointee as Defense Secretary, as his new Attorney General. He gave Richardson absolute authority, he said, to prosecute Watergate and to choose a special supervising prosecutor if need be. Previously, the president had rejected such suggestions. After his speech, the president commented to a small group of newsmen, "We've had our differences in the past. Just continue to give me hell when you think I'm wrong." The rest of this morning's news from Frank Blair in just 2 minutes. This is Today on NBC.
Remember how it was, America? Somehow we lived simpler, more natural lives and ate more natural food. Now many people wish these simpler, more natural times were back again. And so does Pet Incorporated. We've made a natural cereal called Heartland. New Heartland has natural protein, no artificial preservatives, and no cooking, you just add milk. And you can't help liking it, because you have a natural taste for Heartland.
If this kind of softness has your friends wondering, what do you say? Fluff makes it whisper soft. And if he notices the difference too, give him the word. Fluff makes it whisper soft. When all your washables are whisper soft, the answer is Fluff, the fabric softener from Texeyes that saves you money and makes your whole wash whisper soft. Whisper soft.
Being a better newsman, it's more than just knowing the news.
Everything seems to revolve around the home life, and you enjoy the things at home. You can't enjoy anywhere else, but I enjoy cooking, piddling around the kitchen, reading, and the music, of course.
The simple life, the friendly life, behind the scene and on the scene at 6 and 10. Boyce Hawkins is part of a special team of men who have it all together.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Lewis. As a resident of Nashville, I've been involved with various public service groups. We have found that whenever we need a special promotion for our projects, the staff of Channel 4 has always been more than willing to help us. So whenever your group needs special help in publicizing its community-oriented projects, contact the staff of WSM-TV for their help. It's yours for the asking.
At the office of Daniel Ellsberg, psychiatrist, by 2 of the convicted Watergate conspirators. The judge also disclosed the Nixon administration had offered him a job. A report from Frank Bergholzer.
Federal Judge Matt Byrne has brushed aside the fact that the White House offered him the job of FBI director in the midst of the Pentagon Papers case. Byrne announced that nothing happened except the job offer, which he said he refused to discuss with presidential aide John Ehrlichman. And while he wants a sweeping investigation of all connections between this case and the Watergate scandal, he also wants this case to proceed. Defense lawyer Leonard Boudin argued strongly the case should not proceed. The fact that Watergate burglars also allegedly burglarized the office of defendant Ellsberg's psychiatrist, said Boudin, must be seen in the light of Justice Department entanglement in Watergate. Boudin said it tended to prove the very prosecution of Ellsberg and Russo was a political plot, not an attempt to find a criminal. Judge Byrne did not totally reject this possibility. His orders to Prosecutor Nissen were to find and turn over everything involving every probe ever made of anyone concerned in the Pentagon Papers case. Prosecutor Nissen was specifically ordered to produce documents already mentioned in the Watergate case, which were found in offices and safes in the White House. Defense counsel Leonard Weinglass also seconded Boudin's request for a special hearing in which all the now famous Watergate personalities would be available here for cross-examination. Weinglass also indicated the job offer to Judge Byrne would not be overlooked by the defense. The judge did not deny the hearing request, but indicated the matter of the job offer was closed, and he ordered testimony to continue today. Frank Bergholzer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
North Vietnam's foreign minister, Nguyen Co Thach, today ruled out a meeting in the near future between Henry Kissinger and Le Duc Tho. Thach said in Paris the atmosphere is not favorable at present. The White House had said a meeting would take place this month. Thach and U.S. representatives yesterday finished preliminary talks in Paris on ways to end violations of the ceasefire. In South Vietnam, a strong buildup of communist forces is reported in the mountains west of Hue, and there are fears of an attack on the city. The foreign minister of South Yemen and a number of the country's other diplomats and officials were killed last night in the crash of a Yemeni airliner in the desert, about 290 miles north of Yemen. Altogether, 25 persons died. 10:30 after the hour. Scattered severe thunderstorms are expected today and tonight from northern Texas and Oklahoma into southeast Kansas, all of Arkansas and Missouri, to southeastern Iowa, to southeastern Wisconsin, and to all of Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. This looks like a very strong pattern coming up, so keep in contact with local advisories. 16 tornadoes have occurred since this time yesterday morning. A major spring storm is over the hard-hit central states again. More heavy rainfalls are due today for the Midwest and the Mississippi Valley areas. Wyoming and Colorado will continue heavy snows today. A little more than 11 minutes after the hour, and at that time we return to Washington and Frank McGee.
Thank you, Frank. Stay with us for a look at the Watergate cast of characters, and for Barbara Walters with an essay on H.R. Haldeman, and Bill Monroe with some thoughts on Watergate. This is Today on NBC.
This has gone far enough. Huh? Come on in. We got him.
This afternoon's movie entertainment is filled with intriguing terror on The Wasp Woman, starting at 3:30 here on Channel 4. A cosmetic firm owner submits to injections to restore her beauty but becomes a wasp woman instead. See it all today at 3:30 here on Channel 4. Get the facts. Get your money's worth. That's what National Consumer Information Week is all about. Before you buy, get the facts. Do some homework before you go out shopping. Check advertised specials and get in the habit of reading labels and tags. They tell you what you're going to get for your money. When you know what you're buying, you're a better buyer. And buying wisely means spending wisely. This message brought to you by your local Better Business Bureau.
Good night. Thank you very much. Good night. See you all next week. Hi, folks. Hey, you won't want to miss the next exciting program of I've Got a Secret. I've Got a Secret's an all-new fun show with great guest celebrities and all-star panelists, and yours truly, Steve Allen, is the genial but secret-keeping host. So please join me in our panel every week in unraveling secrets that'll boggle your mind. All for laughs here on I've Got a Secret.
Join Steve Allen and the Secret Gang for fun tonight at 6:30 here on Channel 4.
Of government scandals in the United States so far, it is Watergate that has assembled the most varied and bizarre cast of characters. They have included a locksmith, a novelist, footpads, lawyers, former spies, revolutionaries, real estate salesmen, and presidential advisors. For a Republican undertaking, it's been a most democratic affair. Among the principal characters have been H.R. Haldeman, Mr. Nixon's one-time chief of staff, and Mr. Nixon's former domestic affairs counselor, John Ehrlichman. Now the two men who formed what the press called a Berlin Wall around the president are gone. Haldeman resigned yesterday, insisting his resignation was his idea and submitted only to help restore public confidence in the presidency. Although the Washington Post says this morning neither Haldeman nor Ehrlichman wanted to quit. The press had linked Haldeman to a secret campaign and sabotage fund. Ehrlichman, like Haldeman, said he was resigning in the interest of the presidency. The resignation followed charges that Ehrlichman had been involved in directing the destruction of documents belonging to a Watergate conspirator. And still another resignation, Attorney General Richard Kleindienst. Kleindienst has never been linked to the conspiracy. He resigned simply because, he said, too many of his friends were said to be involved. And this is John Dean III. He was at one time Mr. Nixon's White House lawyer. It was Dean who conducted the first White House probe of Watergate on assignment from the president and reported to the president that no White House aides were involved. Dean was fired. The cast and casualties continue. Jeb Stuart Magruder, a high official in Nixon's re-election campaign, quit his job in the Commerce Department after telling about discussions of the bugging arrangements with former Attorney General John Mitchell. John Mitchell has been in and out of the story since July, when he quit as Mr. Nixon's campaign manager about 2 weeks after Watergate broke. He denied publicly, but testified privately, that he had discussed the bugging, which he said he rejected. Later, commenting on Watergate, Mitchell said, "The thing is getting sillier as it goes along." And this is Elliot Richardson. He went from Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare to Secretary of Defense. Now he is Attorney General designate and in charge of the Watergate inquiry. But how long Richardson will be on that job, no one knows. In Congress, many Republicans, as well as Democrats, are saying the administration cannot adequately investigate itself. Whatever, Watergate has been with us now for almost a year, and it has not shown any signs of going away. Barbara Walters is in New York now with an essay on H.R. Haldeman. Barbara?
Thank you, Frank. Of the 4 men who resigned yesterday, H.R. Bob Haldeman was by far the most enigmatic, the least accessible to the public or press, and the closest to the president. As the president's chief of staff, doorkeeper, personal confidant, and some say alter ego, Haldeman had closer access to the president than anyone else on his staff or cabinet. Haldeman had no schedule of his own. His schedule revolved totally around the president. And so important was he that if Henry Kissinger wanted to do a television interview, it had to be approved by H.R. Haldeman. No one applauds a personal tragedy, and few today can be pleased that scandal has rocked the White House, but there are many members of the government and press who are pleased at Haldeman's downfall. Few reporters ever got to talk with him personally. Those of us who did found that he could be warm, amusing, and cooperative. One couldn't help but admire his obvious devotion and loyalty to the president. But most saw in him arrogance, in his attitude that only those high up in the administration knew what was best for the country. Mr. Haldeman made no effort to conceal his lack of affection for Congress or the press. Then, too, there was his very lack of accessibility. He made no appearances on the Washington social scene or at the great variety of Washington banquets, and he rarely gave interviews. In over 4 years as the president's assistant, the only interview Mr. Haldeman ever did on television was on this program in February last year. At that time, he described his pride in his job and his sense of purpose.
I was just thinking, the other night, the president gave a dinner for the cabinet and some of the senior White House staff, and in his very moving remarks to this group at the end of the dinner, he paid tribute to Secretary Stans and Secretary Hardin, who had left the cabinet. But then he spoke to the whole group in terms of looking back on the 3 years that we've been here and the year yet to go, and the question of what we've accomplished and where we're getting. And this speaks really to his view of the presidency, I think, because he made the point that we, the staff and cabinet, are accused of being dull, gray, pragmatic men who just plod along trying to get things done. And then he made the point that history is full of pages about idealists who never got anything done. And that if we're accused of being pragmatists and dull and gray, so be it. The point here is that we are people. The president is a man, and the rest of his team are people who believe very deeply, who believe in what needs to be done for this country. But then he made the point that all of us could look back and think to ourselves, what would this place be if we hadn't been here? over the past 3 years. And looking at it in that context, we come up with a pretty good feeling.
It was in this interview that Mr. Haldeman made headlines by saying that anyone, including members of Congress who disagreed with the president's peace plan for Vietnam, was consciously aiding and abetting the enemy.
He is naturally concerned by the kind of criticism that can get in the way of what he's trying to do, and that would be unfair criticism, or the kind of criticism you get a very good case in point right now, where we're faced with the president having the other night on television very carefully explained the background and the present status of his peace negotiations in attempting to negotiate an end to the war in Vietnam. And before that talk on television, you could say that his critics, people who were opposing what he was doing, were unconsciously echoing the line that the enemy wanted echoed. Now, after this explanation, after the whole activity is on the record and is known, the only conclusion you can draw is that the critics now are consciously aiding and abetting the enemy of the United States. And I think that kind of criticism is deeply disturbing to him, because it gets in the way of getting done what he so deeply believes must be done in trying to bring this war to an end through the negotiations route.
It is this attitude that the White House could do no wrong, that it was beyond criticism or questioning, that those who disagreed were at best misinformed or at worst enemies. It was this attitude that makes the downfall of H.R. Haldeman seem like a fall from a very great height indeed. Who will take his place in devotion and service to the president? Late yesterday afternoon, I spoke to one of President Nixon's aides about this. It was, of course, much too soon to tell, he said, but he suggested that not only would there be a change of staff, but perhaps of the staff system as well. Perhaps a staff with much less power. Ron Ziegler he described as a stalwart to the president these last weeks. He could move higher up in the White House ladder, but he is just 33, quite young for so great a responsibility. A relatively new name to most of us, but a man to watch is Ken Cole, the 34-year-old executive director of the President's Domestic Council. He might well take over some of John Ehrlichman's tasks. Or the President might go outside the White House for his new staff. As the new Secretary of Defense, the name of John Connally has cropped up, but according to the White House aide we talked with, that seems unlikely. A White House staff structure with looser power may be more difficult for the President. And one of the reasons is that it may make the president much more accessible to his other aides, his cabinet, Congress, and the press, something his tight and powerful former aides rarely allowed. And now back to Frank in Washington.
Thank you, Barbara. And I've been joined by Today Washington editor Bill Monroe, who has some thoughts on Watergate. Bill?
Frank, it's interesting that today is Law Day. Last night we had the president's speech. This morning we have Law Day 1973. And you can look at that combination in a couple of different ways. You can take a negative, pessimistic view of it. Here we have Law Day following months of revelations by about high officials breaking the law and sometimes playing dirty tricks that seem to subvert the idea of a process of fairness in American politics. Suitcases stuffed with cash, 1, 2, 3 secret funds, evidence destroyed, burglary inside the Watergate building, endless denials, eventually termed in language worthy of a computer inoperative, all of that and more leading up to Law Day. That's the pessimistic view. But on a more positive note, we have the view that President Nixon touched on last night when he said that it was the system that brought the facts to light. A few months ago, it looked as if somebody had managed to cover up Watergate. Nobody knew who was trying to cover it up, but 7 men had been convicted. At the same time, nobody knew who told them to do it. But some journalists refused to let it go, led by the publisher and editor of the Washington Post and their reporters Bernstein and Woodward. The judge who tried the Watergate 7 got angry because he felt the prosecution was not trying to get at all the facts, and he pressured one of the men to tell his story. The two-party system helped out, the suit by the Democrats trying to get at the facts. A citizens group, Common Cause, went to court to try to pry loose some information on secret campaign contributions. The Senate asked Sam Ervin to investigate. The whole thing began to smell to the American people. Various Republican leaders began prodding the president to do something about it, to root it out, to tell what happened, and to fire those who needed firing. Yesterday, the president did, and as he acknowledged, the White House failed, but the system eventually worked, and it's called Checks and Balances, so it turns out to be Law Day after all.
Thank you, Bill, very much. Don't go far.
The encore presentation of an award-winning special tomorrow at 10, 9 Central Time.
Most folks are in the dark about buying light bulbs, even with all those numbers. So Westinghouse makes it easy for you to pick out the Westinghouse bulb that gives you the most life. Just look at our shapes. Our good soft white is plain old round. Average life, 750 hours. Our better one is this T-shaped bulb called eye saving. Average life, 1,000 hours. Our best, the 3,000 hour super bulb, is cone-shaped. See? Now you can pick the right bulb at a glance. And you can be sure if it's Westinghouse.
Now here's a look at the local news and weather on the scene today. Here's your reporter, Pat Sajak.
Good morning. Tennessee's top Republicans generally praised President Nixon's Watergate speech last night. Senator Howard Baker said the president's actions will not alter plans for a full Senate investigation of the scandal. Baker is the ranking Republican on the Senate committee investigating the incident. Tennessee's other senator, William Brock, said President Nixon has done what he had to do to restore confidence in the government. The Tennessee House of Representatives burned the midnight oil last night and early this morning. Lawmakers worked for more than 7 hours on the massive general appropriations bill. The session ended just before 1 a.m. The lower chamber considered 88 amendments. State Finance and Administration Commissioner Ted Welch says the amendments adopted would add $300 million to Governor Dunn's nearly $2 billion budget. Welch said most of the increases amounted to what he termed pork barrel. The state Senate has passed and sent to the governor legislation which would provide classrooms with equipment and teachers for a total comprehensive vocational program in every high school in the state. Passage of the bill represents a sweeping change in present educational attitudes in Tennessee. One of the bill's sponsors, Senator Jim White of Memphis, says surveys show that in the past, education has been catering to only about 20% of the students. White said bonds totaling $132 million will have to be authorized to finance implementation of the program. A congressional subcommittee opens hearings today on rate increases by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Congressman Joe Evans says he hopes the public hearings will force the agency to roll back some of its increases. Evans, who's a Tennessee Democrat, is chairman of the House Subcommittee on Appropriations for Public Works. The Davidson County Grand Jury has urged that more money be allocated for a general hospital here in Nashville. The panel said there is also a need for a new building at the facility. The grand jury praised the Metro Police Department and the District Attorney's Office. Jurors also called for more money for the Metro Workhouse and an expansion of the county's juvenile court program. The city of Morristown and Hamlin County have gone to the Chancery Court in Nashville in an attempt to prevent construction of a regional prison in their area. A suit said such a prison would endanger students at Walters State Community College at Morristown. We'll check the weather now for you. We'll look at our national map, and you'll see the frontal system that is near our area. Right now, the big low is centered over Oklahoma, and in back of it, just to the southeast of the microphone, you can see the snow, and to the south of the front, the rain and the thunder shower activity, which appears to be moving our way. Last hour, we reported WSM's exclusive long-range radar showed showers moving our way, and as a result, not as a result, but in the meantime, the Weather Bureau has revised its forecast, and it is now calling for showers and thunder showers to be coming our way this morning. Mostly cloudy and mild with showers and possibly a few thunderstorms. That's the forecast for this morning, tonight, and again tomorrow. High today in the upper 70s, low tonight mid-60s, high tomorrow in the low 70s. Probabilities of rain 70% this morning and 70% tonight, 80% tomorrow. Right now in Nashville with cloudy skies at 63 degrees, and that's the scene today. Good morning.
This kind of dirt gets into your carpet every single day. How do you get it out? Tree Wax Rug Shampoo and Conditioner. Our super concentrated formula lifts out food stains, ugly spots and drink stains, and filthy ground-in dirt. Tree Wax Rug Shampoo lifts dirt and stains up and out.
Tree Wax Rug Shampoo and rental machines available at Morris Rent-All Centers, all locations to serve you. There's a big morning of entertainment coming up here on Channel 4.
I understand you need doctors.
Do we ever? We need people of all skills. But mostly, Action needs doctors and nurses for the Peace Corps and Vista. Incidentally, do you make cave calls?
I don't, but my assistant does. Give him one of your cave calls.
Don't crawl under a rock. Get into action.
Point in this hour of a special Today program originating in Washington, concentrating entirely on the Watergate affair. President Nixon accepted the resignations of 3 top White House aides, John Ehrlichman, H.R. Haldeman, and John Dean III, plus Attorney General Richard Kleindienst yesterday. And then the president went on television last night. The Watergate story broke last June. Republicans or Republican hirelings bugged Democratic campaign headquarters, followed through the months by attempts at cover-up and backtracking. Disclosure followed disclosure. In his speech last night, the president declared he had been misled.
As the investigations went forward, I repeatedly asked those conducting the investigation whether there was any reason to believe that members of my administration were in any way involved. I received repeated assurances that there were not. Because of these continuing reassurances, because I believed the reports I was getting, because I had faith in the persons from whom I was getting them, I discounted the stories in the press that appeared to implicate members of my administration or other officials of the campaign committee.
The president then accepted responsibility for Watergate, named Elliot Richardson his new attorney general, said that Richardson could choose a special prosecutor to help him if need be, and in a turnabout, Mr. Nixon acknowledged that indeed, as part of the overall system, a vigorous free press had helped bring the facts of the Watergate scandal to light. For the rest of the news, here is Frank Blair in New York. Frank?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Shortly after his television speech, President Nixon last night signed the bill which extended his powers to control wages and prices for another year. The bill, which received only reluctant support in both the House and the Senate, contained none of the mandatory rollbacks favored by consumer advocates. In Paris this morning, Nguyen Co Thach, the deputy foreign minister of North Vietnam, said there was no chance of a meeting in the near future between Henry Kissinger and Le Duc Tho, North Vietnam's chief negotiator, at the Paris peace talks. He said the atmosphere is not favorable. The minister had just finished 3 meetings with Assistant Secretary of State William Sullivan on aid to North Vietnam and implementing the ceasefire. It's May Day, a communist holiday, but in all the communist world, only East Germany scheduled a military parade. In Moscow, more than 1 million people are marching through Red Square, watched by Kremlin leaders. The government of Argentina declared martial law in Buenos Aires and 5 provinces last night after another political assassination. Rear Admiral Hermes Quillada, who had announced the shooting of 16 left-wingers last year in what he called a jailbreak attempt, was killed in his automobile by men firing a machine gun from a speeding motorcycle. South Yemen's foreign minister and a number of the country's diplomats and other officials have been killed in the crash of a Yemeni airliner about 290 miles northeast of Aden. A government statement said the airliner went down in a remote desert region and all 25 persons aboard were killed. In California, there was still a possibility of more unexploded bombs in the wreckage of the Southern Pacific munitions train, which was destroyed in a series of explosions over the weekend. A report from Vic Biondi.
The Army squads continued to clean up debris from the explosions and fire. The bombs and shrapnel were found up to 400 yards away from the center of the explosions. Southern Pacific crews have put out all the fires. Railroad officials estimate that the explosions and fires did $6 million damage to tracks and equipment in a 200-square-yard area. People living in the immediate area of the train yard moved back in and started cleaning up damage to their homes. damage estimated at more than $2 million. The Army told Southern Pacific it could begin moving trains again, but until all unexploded bombs are removed, the Army told the railroad it is operating at its own risk. Vic Biondi, NBC News, Roseville, California.
The weather forecast in a moment, 35 minutes after the hour, and now here's a word from United Airlines on making your next business trip more pleasant.
It begins. Another business day. For Del Collins, today's business will be done far away. So he'll commute to work on United Airlines. And since Del's a man with big plans on his mind, United will try to eliminate the hassles, to get him quickly to a wide, comfortable seat with a breakfast so good, not even a bad joke can spoil it. And with a feeling that he's got friends working to make this trip a really good one, going and coming home again. At United, Del is more than just a passenger. He's an individual we're out to please. Maybe that's why more businessmen and women choose United than any other airline in your land.
The friendly skies of your land, United Airlines.
Scattered severe thunderstorms are expected today and tonight in a large area reaching from North Texas and Oklahoma across southeastern Kansas, Iowa, and Wisconsin into all of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana. This looks like a very strong storm pattern coming up, so be sure to keep in contact with local forecasts, especially in our sky-warned bulletin areas. 16 tornadoes have occurred the past 24 hours. May is starting off where April ended, with still another major spring storm for the hard-hit central states. Heavy 1 to 3 inch rains are possible today in the Midwest and the Mississippi Valley with the thunderstorms. Heavy snows will continue today in Wyoming's southeast mountains and across Colorado's mountain areas to the northeast slopes. 6 more inches are due for mountain regions and 4 for lower elevations. Nearly a foot has fallen overnight in parts of Wyoming. The far west will be fair, the southeast fair and warm. The northeast and New England will be cool with increasing clouds and showers. 37 after the hour. We have some notes on sports for you after this message.
General Electric clears the tracks for National Sale Days. From now until May 30th, we've lowered prices to dealers so they can lower prices to you on selected GE dishwashers, freezers, refrigerators, washers, dryers, and ranges. And here's GE's new portable air conditioner. Not on sale, but the price is right. See your participating dealer now. Look for the red caboose during GE's National Sale Days.
If I told him once, I told him 100 times, wear your raincoat. I knew he wouldn't, but I fixed him. I sprayed his jacket and his jeans with Scotch Guard brand fabric protector. I even sprayed his sneakers with Scotch Guard protector. Rain runs right off instead of soaking in. Only he didn't wear them either.
Listen to your mother.
Scotch Guard fabric protector for kids who won't wear raincoats.
The Kentucky Colonels defeated the Indiana Pacers 114 to 102 last night to even their American Basketball Association Championship Series at 1 game each. Artis Gilmore with 29 points and Dan Eisel with 28 were top scorers for Kentucky. The series resumes Thursday night in Indianapolis. The Los Angeles Lakers and the New York Knicks square off tonight in Los Angeles in the first game of their playoff for the National Basketball Association title. The Lakers beat the Knicks in 5 games in last year's championship series, and Los Angeles is rated the favorite this time around. The Soviet Union basketball team beat the United States team 78 to 76 last night in San Diego in a rugged game. 4 players fouled out, and a 5th, Minnesota's Ron Behagen, was asked to leave the game because of elbowing. The Russian win evens the series at 1 game each. They'll play again tomorrow night in Albuquerque. 39 minutes after the hour, Ozite and Herculon Fiber present a whole new way of looking at indoor-outdoor carpet.
This is Ozite's new Colony Point indoor-outdoor carpet made of Herculon olefin fiber. It's very beautiful and very tough. And to prove it, we carpeted the Baltimore City Zoo. Their claws could wreck an ordinary carpet, but Colony Point's beautifully textured construction won't snag even in a lion's den. The tightly packed pile of Herculon really holds up under pressure, too. And with its outdoor cushion backing, you can put it anywhere. Herculon won't absorb moisture, so stains clean up fast. In fact, the only squawk we got was from our pet peacock. Faced with Colony Point's deep, beautiful colors, he couldn't stand the competition. See Ozite's Colony Point carpet and tiles of Herculon. A whole new way of looking at indoor-outdoor carpet.
Watergate has had Republicans troubled for some time, and in just a moment we'll be talking with 4 Republican senators, Peter Dominick, Edward Brooke, Charles Percy, and James Buckley, about what further can be done. So don't go far.
Vince Edwards and Jill St. John had an all-star cast in a rip-roaring Western musical Thursday night.
Swami Levy, I see great things in stores for men this season.
What stores?
Levy's stores, naturally. Where else?
You don't need a crystal ball to know that Levy's is the leader in men's fashions.
Downtown, Rivergate, 100 Oaks, or ask your nearest gypsy.
It's Rod McEwen in his only Nashville concert with the Stannion Strings, the Grand Ole Opry House, Tuesday, May 8th at 8 p.m.
Republican Party worried. There are elections in 1974 and again in 1976, and right now recent public opinion surveys show that Mr. Nixon's popularity and credibility are slipping. So the Republicans want him to move hard and fast to clean up Watergate and restore the standing of the party. Whether this can be done effectively and in time is something that we will discuss, among other matters now, with 4 Republican senators. Peter Dominick of Colorado, Edward Brooke of Massachusetts, Charles Percy of Illinois, and James Buckley of New York, Republican, who runs on the Conservative Party ticket as well. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. And the first question I'd like to take up is whether, and we'll turn to you, Senator Dominick, or whether you're satisfied that President Nixon has done all he can or should do.
Frank, I think he's done a great deal to restore the credibility and the feeling of really trying to get at the root of this thing. By his speech last night, by his action last night. I think one of the more important things he's done is to put Elliot Richardson in as Attorney General, not because Mr. Kleindienst was involved, because he was such a close friend that it's very difficult for him to do anything about it. No, Mr. Kleindienst from Arizona.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I think, having known Elliot for a long time, I'm sure he's going to do an #1 job in getting at this, regardless of where the chips may be. There are some people, and quite a few, I think, who would like to see an independent investigation. The question is, can we do it? Can you really find an impartial investigator? I suppose we can, but it's going to be difficult, I think.
Senator Percy, I know that you have a plan to introduce legislation calling for an independent investigation today. Can you tell us about it and what you think the prospects of it actually coming about might be?
I think, Mr. McGee, we all agonized with the President. I had intended to introduce that legislation or resolution yesterday, but I held off to watch the President last night. I'm now reaffirmed in my feeling that though we agonize, we have a separate constitutional responsibility. The Constitution in Chapter or Article 2, Section 2 is very clear that all officers of the United States government appointed by the President shall be subject to confirmation by the Senate except such inferior offices as the Congress delegates to the President. I would not consider a special prosecutor, in this case, an inferior office. Mr. Peterson, who is now conducting the investigation or the prosecution, is subject to Senate confirmation. And the bill that I'll be introducing with Senator Buckley's co-sponsorship, Senator Dole, Senator Goldwater, Senators Mathias, Case, Javits, a wide spectrum of thought, will require confirmation of the man appointed by the President, and this will share the responsibility then for seeing that this man is the man of the highest integrity, beyond the reach of the executive branch of government, fully endowed with all of the power necessary to carry on an impartial investigation.
Senator
I'd like to comment on that, and I don't believe that any one of us would have any question as to the vigor with which Mr. Richardson would conduct an investigation. But I think we're talking about public confidence, and the public will understand that Mr. Richardson has been on the Nixon team from the beginning, and there will always be some doubters, some skeptics, and I think to have a truly independent man would be essential for the public at large to understand that we have, in fact, found the truth.
May I ask either of you if you've been in touch with the White House about this, and if so, what their attitude toward it might be?
I have had discussions with the President and with Mr. Ehrlichman and others about the general principle of restoring the constitutional provisions of confirmation of important appointments. I think there are people in the White House today that should be confirmed by the Senate, and I have legislation in. One bill is already overwhelmingly passed the Senate, and others are coming forward. They disagree. The President agreed in one instance the Director of Cost of Living should be confirmed by the Senate. But in this case, I think there can be no dispute in principle that this is an urgent matter, and it's not impugning the integrity of Mr. Richardson. I think highly of him. He's a colleague of Senator Brooks and has known him for years. But I think we should simply remove every appearance of any conceivable conflict of interest, and that's what the Constitution provides. That's what I intend to insist upon, and my colleagues in the Senate, I think, will join me.
Some surveys made before the President's speech last night and a rapid survey of opinion following his speech last night indicated that a good many people feel across the country that the President himself is somehow involved in this. Senator Brooke, are you satisfied that the President had no prior knowledge of the campaign espionage activities or the later attempts to cover them up?
Well, I don't believe the President had, and I certainly hope and pray that he did not, Frank. I think last night he said what he could say. I think he knows more now than, of course, he said last night. But civil liberties of persons who might come before the grand jury or possibly be tried for some crime were involved, and I think the President was right in not saying any more than he said last night. I have some misgivings about Senator Percy's resolution. As a former Attorney General, I have great faith in our judicial system, and I don't like to see superstructuring in our government. If the man is wrong for the job, then change the man, but don't change the job. Now, we have an Attorney General, and that Attorney General, Mr. Kleindienst, has resigned because he felt that it might involve a conflict of interest or his association with persons that he might be called upon to prosecute. And that's correct. He did it, and I think he should be applauded for it. If Mr. Richardson felt that way, he should do the same thing, just as we do with federal judges who have cases brought before them from time to time. They may have a prior knowledge of the case, they might have some prejudice in the case, and so they remove themselves from that particular case. And I think when we begin to start superstructuring, bringing in special prosecutors, and as Peter Dominic said, how do you get an independent person who is not responsible in some form or fashion? Now, Elliot Richardson was my successor in the office of Attorney General in Massachusetts, and I've known him for many, many years. He's an exceptionally able lawyer, and in addition to that, he has the highest integrity. I believe he can do the job as the Attorney General, who will be confirmed by the Senate, incidentally. And I think that if he comes to the point in this investigation where he feels that he has any possible conflict of interest, that he would remove himself and be the first to say so. But I don't believe we ought to bring in presidential commissions, outside prosecutors, to do the job for the Justice Department, which is their constitutional responsibility to do. Once we start doing this, I think we're going down the wrong road.
Mr. McGee, if I could retort to that, I couldn't disagree more strongly with my distinguished colleague, Senator Brooke. This is a government of law, not of men. I can appreciate your strong feelings toward Elliot Richardson. I have a deep affection for Elliot Richardson. But I think we must do what is constitutionally provided, and we must do what precedent has proven to be right. In 1924, in the Teapot Dome scandal, the House and the Senate passed a resolution calling upon the President to appoint a special prosecutor, and this was done. This is not a Teapot Dome scandal. This is far worse, and we haven't heard all of it yet. It's going to be worse before it gets better, I'm afraid. What is the Justice Department to do? Be immobilized? Secretary Richardson is just getting acquainted with the Defense Department that he's taken over a couple of months ago. Now he goes back in to take over the awesome power of the whole Department of Justice. We wouldn't have a federal judge without confirmation. We require confirmation. We require confirmation of a lieutenant when he's promoted to a captain.
Well, you confirm the Attorney General, too.
We do, but we want to confirm the special prosecutor. We want to share the responsibility with the president and say we will bear the burden of responsibility. We will put our integrity behind that man by a confirmation proceeding.
Let us move on, if we may. I wonder if, Senator Buckley, you agree with Senator Percy that the worst is yet to come. Will there be further, more damaging disclosures, do you believe?
Well, the disclosures have reached so broad a spectrum that it's hard to imagine where else they might lead in terms of people whose names have been spoken of in the press. Instinctively, I just like to assume the best of everyone. I know this is a very naive position to take. And I'm going to reserve judgment until the appropriate authorities, which I think basically is the grand jury, has made its findings, has issued such indictments as it believes need to be issued at this point.
Turning to the Republican Party and its stake in 74 and 76, do you believe, Senator Dominic, that the Republican Party can convincingly wage a law and order campaign now?
I don't think that would be the type of campaign that we would be waging anyhow. Each state is going to be different in terms of the Senate races. Each House race is going to be different. And we're going to be doing it on the issues which will come up then. Now, law and order is extremely important insofar as the average citizen is concerned, and the protection on the streets and things of this kind. I think that's still just as important. I don't think this should necessarily get into it. I think what we're talking about here is a question of honesty and justice insofar as how you conduct a political campaign. And it's interesting that no one who has run for office has been implicated in the Watergate deal. This is very fascinating. All people who have not run for office who have been involved in this, which I think is highly significant. We've been saying for a long period of time that someone ought to be given a medal for stupidity over this whole Watergate deal. If we'd asked Larry O'Brien, how would you like $1,000 for your files, I think we'd have gotten the whole works without doing any bugging at all, because he was dead broke. So I think someone ought to be given that kind of a medal. That doesn't stop, however, the concern that people have on credibility, and this is what I think has been partially cleared up. I want to say to Chuck, I think one of the things that's important here, it being Law Day, is to presume that these people are innocent until they've been proved guilty. And I don't think we ought to go on the principle that they're all up to their neck in some kind of molasses. Until that time has been proven, I'm willing to go along on that basis and say, okay, we've cleared the fluff out of the way, now let's go on with the rest of the business.
It's interesting, we took up that question yesterday with the Republican leader of the House and asked him if he felt that a separate standard was involved here. And while he wouldn't adopt that particular language, he very strongly implied that he felt that there was more at stake in a person who held a public office, which is, you people are fond of saying, is a position of public trust.
Well, I think so, too, in the way of credibility, Frank. I would agree on that.
And that you do have, I wonder about that. Could we get some thoughts on that, Senator Buckley?
I think that this is the most important part of this whole issue. I think that the peccadillos, if you want to call it that, in terms of the actual bugging, are minor compared to the savaging of public respect for their institutions. I believe that someone in public office has got to take that Caesar's wife attitude of being above reproach. And I think the resignations that were tendered yesterday, except for Mr. Kleindienst, who was motivated by other considerations, involved a question of taking people out of the decision-making apparatus as to which there had been any kind of suggestion of misfeasance or of covering up. Now, I believe that there should be another standard, but still, we as individuals should not prejudge whether or not guilt is in fact there. Rather, we should expect people to step aside if their presence in office in any way impedes public confidence.
Is the president not going to have a rather difficult problem, Senator Brooke, in trying to find replacements for these key aides in the White House? A good many federal offices, appointive offices, are already vacant in Washington and the other agencies and cabinet. How do you assess that problem?
I think it's going to be difficult, but I think that he will be able to staff his White House office. You know, the country has great resiliency. The party has, and I don't think that irreparable harm has been done. I don't want to minimize it at all. I think it's a disgraceful thing that has happened. But we haven't seen the end of it by any means, Frank. The resignations are not enough. There are persons who obviously have been guilty of criminal violations, and they must be prosecuted, and I think they will. I think the grand jury will do its job. I think Sirica has done a great job as a judge in this case. I think the grand jury has been fearless and courageous. I think the Washington Post certainly should be given credit for what it has done, and other newspapers, but particularly the Washington Post. It was very unpopular at first when it began to constantly write about this. And I think that the system, as the President said last night, is working. And once this is restored, this confidence is restored, I think he won't have any trouble of attracting good men to his cause who will come to the White House and who will rally.
What do you think the future of former Commerce Secretary Maurice Stans, who was the President's principal fundraiser, might be?
Well, Frank, that's still something that hasn't been brought out into the open as yet. We still don't know what Maurice Stans has done. We don't know what Ehrlichman has done. We don't know what Haldeman has done. We don't know exactly what John Dean has done as yet. The President didn't say this last night at all. All the President said was that they had resigned. In fact, the President went into saying that he had full faith and confidence still in Ehrlichman and in Haldeman. By absence of saying that to Dean, that left another case. I thought that part of the President's speech was rather magnificent. I wish he had stopped there and hadn't gone further into what appeared to be a little more inaugural address sort of rhetoric after that. I just bring the facts and then let it go and said, I accept responsibility. I said on Meet the Press a week or so ago that he couldn't avoid responsibility, and he couldn't because these were his appointees, and he very honestly, very candidly said...
We have very little time left. Would it be your feeling that in the future the President should keep more in contact with Congress for samplings of public reaction to this sort of problem?
Certainly should, no question about that. Dominic and I had lunch together yesterday, and we both said we wish that the President had someone who would at least run for county sheriff, which is a statement that's been made before.
Yes,
but at any
Sam
rate, Frank, well, look, John Mitchell had no political experience. Ehrlichman, Haldeman, none of these people had any political experience. They just didn't know what they were doing in many instances.
I think there are a lot of things that we can learn from this experience.
No question.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time to discuss it.
It reaffirms our faith in the institutions. Now let's make them work better.
Thank you so much. We'll be back after this message.
Hi, I'm Tom Shaw. Being a touring golf pro is a tough business, so when I'm playing, I don't want to worry about my clothes or my clubs. That's why my slacks are Sanzabel 2 by J-Mar. They move with me when I swing, and the styling's so great I can wear them when my wife and I go out.
Tom, I have something very important to tell you about Sanzabel 2.
Sure, hon, but first, here's what's really great about Sanzabel 2. J-Mar's elastic waistband that stretches like this to make it the most comfortable slack I've ever worn.
But the girls want to know.
In a second, okay? And Sanzabel 2 has all the color a guy can handle in double knit fabrics of 100% Dacron polyester. It's J-Mar's no-quit knit that really holds a crease. Now,
Sanzabel 2 is washable. Because they're knit of Dacron, you just drop them in the washer dryer and they're ready to go again.
Joy is a washing expert in our family. She also likes to have a last word, so I'll let her say.
Sanzabel 2 is made by J-Mar Ruby Incorporated, Michigan City, Indiana, and soon they'll be making tailored sport coats.
That about brings us to the end of this segment of the Today program. For some of you, this will be all of it. For others, there's still more to come, so don't go far.
Never before seen film of the destruction of America's chemical arsenal and an exclusive interview with Samuel Dash, Chief Counsel of the Senate Committee, on First Tuesday, tonight at 10, 9 Central Time.
Look, Mom, look!
Oh, nice.
Nice and cold.
I'll make hot coffee.
Your coffee? Hon, I'm not that cold.
Mrs. Olson, how can I make coffee he likes?
Coffees do taste different, and I think Folgers tastes best.
Folgers?
Yeah, it's blended special for extra good taste. Try it now.
Smells good?
Tastes great. And I'm not snowing you, honey.
Taste Folgers, mountain-grown coffee.
Put your favorite spring wardrobe on a new fashion footing with opened-up Naturalizer shoes from Shoemate's Shoe Salon in Rivergate Mall. Peekaboo cutouts in beautiful spring colors, and you're still getting that Naturalizer fit and comfort.